Good evening, Strongsville GOP. I said good evening, Strongsville GOP. All right. Welcome back to the last event of our three-event series, the Decision 2024 series. We're looking forward to and very fortunate to have our Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, here in the room tonight. All right. Now, we're going to be starting out in our traditional fashion. If I could ask our very own, in fact, Rob, if you could kill the music for me. I appreciate that. As Rob is going to kill the music, I'd like to ask our very own Beverly Jones to come up and share a prayer to start us off.
Bow our heads. Lord, I thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for this wonderful country.
Check, check. If we could all stand, we'll do our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, justice for all. Great, thank you. Now let me take a minute to share. We have a few elected officials and candidates in the room. First, representing our great Congressman Max Miller, Chase Conklin. And I do see in Chase's hands, he has petitions for Max Miller. If you live here in the 7th District, please make sure you sign a petition for Max Miller tonight. I'm sure Chase would be very appreciative. Thanks, Chase, for being here. Do you want to share anything about Max in D.C. right now? All right, just the kind we liked, not one that doesn't talk. All right, next up is one of my colleagues and my running mate for State Central Committee, Ms. Doris Peters, hailing out of Parma. Now, we've all talked about State Central Committee quite a bit in the past. I know many of you weren't familiar at all what the function of the State Central Committee is, but the State Central Committee is the board of the state party. It has a very specific role, and that is to protect and flourish the Republican Party in the state of Ohio. We also are responsible for electing the chairman and several other statutory duties. Right now, we're focusing on a couple really important topics. Many of those are focusing on how do we make certain that the actions of the Blue 22 do not happen ever again in Ohio. And that's something that Doris and myself have been working on very hard, and we'd love to have updates coming back to you. We clearly cannot afford to have our Republicans go down to Columbus and then team up with the Democrats like Tom DePatten did. We can't afford to have that happen ever again. So that's part of one of the major things State Central Committee is focused on. Also up is representing the Trump campaign in 2024, and that is Mark Kudlowski. I do want to mention, if you look around the room, all the folks that are wearing a white badge, those are our volunteers that are putting together these events every time. We just went through a heck of a campaign season, and I'll tell you what, these folks worked their tails off, and they all deserve a huge round of applause. So thank you so much for the board of the Strongsville GOP. All right, and then next up we have a candidate, and it's official or not official, I'm not sure yet, but it's pretty close to official, I believe, for state representative. We got the email, so I think it's official now. Gordon Short running for state representative. Also our councilman in Ward 4 in Strongsville. Thank you, Gordon. Do you want to come up and say a few words? All right, very good. All right, did I miss any other elected officials or candidates in the room? Well, I did want one special announcement that I wanted to share, and it's special to us on the board of Strongsville GOP because many of you have seen this amazing woman around our meetings, here at the bar. No, I'm not talking about you, Janine. She is amazing, but that's not who I'm talking about this time. But you know, we were all very concerned and worried 18 months ago when Cheryl was diagnosed with cancer, and we are so happy to be able to share today that she's in remission. Wow. Praise be to God. That's amazing, Cheryl. Awesome news. We're so glad to be right here with you. All right. Any other announcements before we get started with the main event tonight? Yes, sir, in the back. I can't see you in the lights. Somebody's raising their hand. Ryan McLean, who is running for state representative in District 15, I believe. Am I right on that? Right. He also has petitions, and I believe 15 is Middleburg Heights, Brook Park, Fairview Park. Am I somewhere close to that? And North Olmsted. Excellent. I was close. And if you live in one of those cities, please sign Ryan's petition there. Hearing nothing else, then what I'd like to do is bring up to the stage our featured guest for the evening to finalize our Decision 2024 series, our own Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, who is running for U.S. Senate here in Ohio, current Green Beret and current reservist, am I correct on that? And all-around great guy, Frank LaRose.
Well, thank you, Shannon. Appreciate that. Thanks to all of you as well. Let me start by saying thank God for the Strongsville GOP, because what you all are doing is making a difference. And I got to tell you that this community is punching above its weight when it comes to a strong Republican club like this. And it's being noticed by others. And I think that others around the state are working to emulate this. And as we know, they call us the grand old party for a reason. We're a social bunch. We enjoy each other's company. But this isn't a social organization. This is a mission-based organization. And our mission is clear. That's to identify candidates who share our conservative values, to help them win, but then to hold them accountable and to make sure they actually do the things that they said they were going to do and govern like Republicans. And so thank you all for doing that. I also want to say thanks to Harvest Saloon. Listen, we live in a time where a lot of people want to cancel us as conservatives. This small business welcomes us. And so let's thank them. You notice I've got a protester out here. They hate the fact that I stand with President Trump. They hate the fact that I told them that their cockamamie 14th Amendment idea to try to take him off the ballot is absolute nonsense and it's not going to fly in Ohio. So they've rewarded me by sending protesters to my house and to places where I speak. And so, you know, be civil when you see them out there, but remind them there's a lot more of us than there are of them who stand with President Trump, who want to make America great again, and who are going to fight to preserve the values that really formed this country. Yeah, exactly. We could invite him in. We may change him. We should try. Exactly. So let me start with this. I want to maybe give a little bit of introduction about my background so that y'all know who I am and where I came from and how I arrived at this place. I want to talk to you about the issues that I'm focused on in this campaign. And I want to finish with a little bit about just kind of the landscape of this race and sort of what the different players are in it. So to start with my background, I'm from Northeast Ohio. I was born and raised in Akron. I served for 8 years in our state Senate from the Akron area, and so I've known this club for many years. But for me, the two really formative experiences as a child growing up, other than my family and the great background they gave me and my faith, the two things that really formed who I am as a teenager were, one, working on a farm as a kid. I worked at Bender's Farm in Copley. That was my job as a kid, and I really loved it. I learned the work ethic that still serves me well today. But the other one was being part of a Boy Scout troop where I had a Boy Scout leader, this was in the 1990s, who was a World War II veteran. He was in his 70s at that point. And Bill Miller told us stories around the campfire about how he was part of the OSS during World War II, how he was part of the Normandy invasion, how he helped liberate a concentration camp as a young infantry officer. And I knew from a young age that I wanted to do something remarkable like that when I grew up. I knew I wanted to serve, and so that's why I enlisted in the Army right after high school. And I found a home. It was where I belonged. I loved the Army, and I had the chance to serve with the 101st Airborne Division as an engineer. I volunteered to be part of a counter-narcotics task force where they sent us down to the U.S.-Mexican border, where we were working with the Border Patrol. And let me tell you, it was a disaster 22 years ago. It's even worse now. We're going to get to that more later. But a quick story. When I was down there with the Border Patrol, they would set us up with these thermal scopes, and we would scan our sector, and then we would call the Border Patrol if we saw somebody coming across the border. So we had on occasion where we form a more perfect union was that no human endeavor is perfect, right? My faith set tells me the last perfect one was hung on a cross 2,000 years ago. So we know nothing that humans do is perfect. Even this country, as divinely inspired and great as this is, the most exceptional nation on the planet, we're not perfect either. But it is each generation's responsibility to form a more perfect union. And that's why I'm running for the United States Senate, because our generation, if we don't act soon, will be the first in our nation's history to leave this country weaker, poorer, and less secure. And I will be damned if that'll happen on my watch. We have a country to save, and that's not hyperbole, it's not exaggeration to say the radical left is trying to take this country in a fundamentally dangerous direction. Only look at what damage the Biden administration has done just in the last few years, both domestically and internationally, And you know what I mean when I say that we've got a country to save. That's why I'm running for the United States Senate. Let me talk about some of the issues that I'm really focused on. First and foremost, it's the economy. And these are not just numbers on a page. This is how hardworking Americans provide for their families. And the Biden-Brown economy is hurting Ohio families, and it's pretty simple to understand because everything costs more, but wages are not rising to keep up with it. So at the end of the month, a lot of families, mine included, are looking at the bills, looking at the paycheck, and figuring out how are they going to make ends meet. What's worse is that Brown and Biden have offered solutions that aren't really solutions. They think that you can spend trillions of dollars and fix inflation if you just call it the Inflation Reduction Act. We know you don't need to be a Nobel Prize economist to understand that trillions of dollars in federal spending are like throwing gasoline on the fire. It makes inflation worse. We know that we need to unleash American energy, and that means mining for coal, drilling for oil and natural gas, but Biden and Brown have made it harder than ever to get the permits necessary to build a pipeline, to drill for oil, to mine for coal. It's energy that drives, it's energy costs that are one of the biggest drivers of this inflation right now. And here's another boneheaded solution that they've offered. They think that if you hire 87,000 new IRS agents, that somehow that's going to fix the economy. Well, I told in a radio interview a couple of months ago, I told it like it was. I said, Sherrod Brown's IRS agents are going to be coming after small business owners. Well, Brown responded. He said, no. LaRose doesn't know what he's talking about. Because those 87,000, this is Brown talking, he said, those 87,000 new IRS agents, we told them they can only go after the rich. They can only go after those who make more than $250,000 a year. Well, folks, Sherrod Brown, who is the Senate banking chairman, I don't think he knows the difference between net and gross. Because most small business owners make more than $250,000 a year. Most farmers, most machine shop owners make more than $250,000 a year, but it doesn't go in their pocket. It goes into fuel and fertilizer. It goes into machine tools and electricity. And so you better believe those 87,000 new IRS agents are sure as hell coming after small business owners, and we need to fight them. That's not how we grow an economy. We know how to grow an economy. It's the great old engine of human prosperity called the free market. We can do that by unleashing human creativity, cutting taxes, streamlining regulations, ripping out all the bureaucracy that has strangled our economy. Biden is making it worse. President Trump was right when he said you got to get rid of two regulations for every new one, and that's exactly what we need to get back to. So the economy is going to be one of my chief focuses. Let's talk about the border. I told you this is personal for me because I served on the border as part of a counter-narcotics task force. It's also personal for me because the crime and the drugs pouring across this border are killing our fellow Ohioans. 200 Americans a day die from fentanyl overdoses. 200. Hey there. 200 a day die from fentanyl. You want to become a Republican? Come join us. We'd love to have you. 200 Americans a day die from fentanyl overdoses, and it's not a mystery how. Imagine if a fully loaded passenger plane crashed every day with 200 people on board. We'd ground all the aircraft until we figured it out. Well, we don't need to figure it out. We know what's happening. It's chemicals from Mexico, thank you, sir, chemicals from China that are mixed together in Mexico that are smuggled across our border by these criminal cartels. This administration refuses to do anything about it, but we know what the solution is. We need to build the darn wall because walls work. Ask Pelosi, she put a wall around the U.S. Capitol when she was worried about her own safety, right? We need to build a wall. But we also need to invest in drones and sensors and cameras so that we can support the Border Patrol to keep that wall secure. The other thing that we need to do is we need to take away the incentive for people to come here. And what that means is no amnesty under any circumstances are offered to people that come here illegally. You think that's a good idea? I do too. So let me be clear. We don't want to secure the border because we hate anyone. We want to secure the border because we love America. And that means that if you came here illegally, you will never get U.S. citizenship, ever, for the rest of your life. If you came here illegally, you can never get government benefits. If you came here illegally, you can't take advantage of the broken asylum process. We need to take away the incentive for people to come here illegally. And I, for one, believe that those who came during the massive invasion of the Biden administration should be deported. I think they should be. Talk about another issue. I'm the only candidate in this race with school-age children. And worked hard for a lot of school board candidates, and thank you for those of you that have taken on this challenge. It's really, really important that we elect conservatives to school board races. Lauren and I have an 8, a 10, and a 12-year-old. I can promise you we are not interested in co-parenting with the government. We want to raise our children with our values, and I think that's something pretty universal. I think every American wants to raise their children with their values, but we've got bureaucrats at the local, state, and federal level who think they know better. Listen to this arrogance from Biden's Secretary of Education. The guy that Biden put in charge of the U.S. Department of Education, which shouldn't even exist, by the way. We should get rid of that agency, and that would save billions of dollars. Biden's Secretary of Education said, I don't respect these parents who show up at school board meetings misbehaving because they think they know better than the professionals what's best for their children. The Secretary of Education said, I don't respect parents who show up at school board meetings and misbehave because they think they know better than the professionals. Well, listen here, Mr. Secretary. Nobody knows better than parents what's best for their children, and it's about damn time that we start educating instead of indoctrinating our children. It's about time that we teach our children to love this country, not to hate this country. And for heaven's sakes, no child should ever be allowed to get any kind of medical procedure without their parents' blessing. It's time that we restore parents' rights in this country. The last issue I want to talk about is American strength. I've got a very simple concept of this, and I recognize that the details are a lot more complex, but listen, it's not American strength which is provocative. It's not American strength which causes instability around the world. It's American weakness that is provocative and causes insecurity around the world. And Joe Biden has demonstrated nothing but weakness. It's Joe Biden's weakness with this sham of a withdrawal from Afghanistan that cost the lives of some of our finest service members. It's Joe Biden's weakness with the southern border. It's Joe Biden's weakness with the way that he's handled Ukraine that has given the green light for bad guys around the world to do bad things. Why do you think Iran gave their buddies Hamas the green light to invade southern Israel and to kill more Jews on one day than any day since the Holocaust? It's because of weakness. It's about time that we return to the Reagan doctrine of peace through strength. Now, let me be clear about this. This doesn't mean that we get involved in every little petty thing around the world and solve other people's problems for them. But what it does mean is when America's strategic national interest is at stake, America will engage, and we're not going to engage unless we're ready to do it robustly and to win. That's something that this administration hasn't done. Look at the way they've handled Ukraine. It's money. They just continuously throw money at it. How about make the sanctions work the way that they're supposed to? The Russians have loopholes they could drive a hay wagon through. How about leaning on our foreign allies to actually make them bear their share of the burden, just like President Trump did when he said that NATO countries have to actually fund their own defense instead of relying on us. You know who one of the biggest offenders is? Canada. Just 50 miles from here, Canada is underinvesting in their military because they expect us to do it for them. That needs to end. But there's something else. There's something else. We need to have a military that's focused on the right things. Let me be very blunt with you. As somebody who's served in the military since I was 18 years old, this is dirty, awful, difficult work. The reason why you have a military is so that you can kill people and break things until the other side gives up. Not easy. It's not nice. And this wokeness that is infecting our military must end. The Navy thinks you can hire a drag queen to be a recruiter, and that's going to fix their recruiting problems. So I believe in returning to American strength. Let me just contrast really quick, because I'm genuinely not here to say bad things about my opponents. It's not my style. It's not how I work. But I do want to just share some of the differences between myself and the other gentlemen that are running. But first, let's consider what the mission is. Army guy here. I continue to talk about mission. The mission is to defeat Sherrod Brown. We have got one chance to defeat Sherrod Brown next year. Sherrod Brown is wrong on everything, but he's also a very crafty politician. and he will not be easy to beat. If you need proof of that, look at what happened in Ohio last Tuesday. You cannot take this state for granted and think that we have just become this red state and we can phone it in and that the nominee of our party doesn't matter. We need to nominate our strongest candidate to defeat Sherrod Brown. I would humbly submit for you that I am the strongest candidate to defeat Sherrod Brown, and proof is the fact that the Democrats have already decided I'm the one they're afraid of. That's why they send protesters to follow me around. That's why they make up things with their allies in the media and attack me with false narratives. They've decided that I'm the enemy. And I think that the fact that I have won 4 statewide elections, 2 primaries and 2 generals, and the fact that I have performed better than anybody that's ever held the office of Secretary of State, I got more votes last year than anybody in the history of this office. The fact that I got 100,000 more votes than Sherrod Brown did when we both ran in previous elections, that shows that I have the strength to beat Sherrod Brown, and if you will help me, that's exactly what we're going to get done. Let's talk about the other 3 guys in the race. If you're looking for somebody who's really wealthy and connected, who has all the right friends in Washington, not your guy. There are 2 other guys running, and listen, we celebrate success and prosperity. Nothing wrong with it. But I'm the only one in the race who's not a millionaire. Lauren and I are thousandaires. Live in an 1,800 square foot house. We drive 6-year-old cars. We know the struggles that normal Ohioans face, and there's not a lack of billionaires in the Senate. 53 out of the 100 members of the Senate are millionaires. But you know what there is a lack of? I'd be the first Green Beret over there. I think that counts for something. I'm also the battle-tested candidate. I'm the battle-tested conservative, and listen, talk is cheap. It's easy to say whatever you want to say. I'm the one who has stood up and taken the tough votes on the state Senate floor and proven it. I'm the one that has fought over the last couple years for issues that you all know were difficult, but we fought for them because they were the right things to do. I'm the only candidate in this race with a 100% pro-gun voting record, and I think the Constitution is very clear when it says shall not be infringed. And so if you're looking for a pro-gun guy, I'm your guy. I'm the only candidate in this race with a 100% pro-life voting record, and I will stand for life because it's what my belief tells me, and it's also what I think government exists for, is to protect innocent life. Also the only candidate in this race with a 100% record on tax cuts, not tax increases. I signed the Taxpayer Protection Pledge. I would not vote to increase taxes. We've got too much of that already in Washington, a $33 trillion national debt, because it seems like the one thing the political insiders in Washington agree on, Republicans and Democrats, is that they like to spend your hard-earned money. And it's going to take somebody that's got a spine of steel and is going to be a conservative to say, no, we're cutting government and we're not raising taxes because we're taxed enough already in this country. Let me end with this. I told you at the beginning that I raised my right hand at 18 and made a commitment. And my fellow veterans know that this is a commitment that's a lifelong commitment, that I would preserve and protect the Constitution, that I would defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. But it also meant I was signing a blank check, because I decided at 18 years old this country is so precious that it's worth dying for. If we're to be honest, there's very few things that are that dear, that are that precious. Very few. Your faith, your family, this country. I believe with every fiber of my being that America is so precious that it's worth dying for. And I've known some damn good men and women that have. But if this country's so precious that it's worth dying for, isn't it also so precious that it's worth living for? That's why I've decided to run for the United States Senate, because we have a country to save. I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking for your prayers. This is a year-long job interview, and with your help, we'll beat Sherrod Brown next year, and we'll put this country back on track and make America great again. Thank you so much, everybody. God bless.
Okay, folks, now, as you, those of us have all attended these before, we know the tradition of Strongsville GOP, and that is that you can come over right to here and ask, and Frank is anxiously, very interested in hearing your questions, is going to answer all of your questions. So if you have a question for Frank, come on over here. Right now, we're waiting for you right now. Come on up, come on up. Now, I will tell you this, there is one rule, and everyone knows the rule. Rob's going to be here to enforce it. We have questions, not statements. If you want to make a statement, go out and talk to the protester. If you want to ask a question, talk to Frank. So, and please come on up, stand right in here in line. We're going to move the mic up just a bit, and there you go. Take it away.
Thank you for everything you did in the last 2 elections to preserve life and preserve the Constitution of the state of Ohio. You had mentioned talking about small business and regulations and things like that Washington and the Democrats, including Sherrod Brown, are trying to put on people. The Financial Crimes Enforcement Network next year is requiring all small businesses to file a form with them with all kinds of ownership information, personal information about the owners. And if you don't file that form, one of the penalties is 2 years in jail and a large fine. Sherrod Brown is on the Financial Finance Committee, which the FinSec reports to. What are your thoughts on this regulation that's going to hurt small business and small business owners?
It is unmitigated garbage. Now, who's familiar with this? Thank you for the question. You're going into the deep cuts here a little bit because this is one that a lot of people aren't familiar with. Some call it the beneficial ownership rule. Some call it FinCEN because that's an acronym that it goes by. This is a regulation that's meant to target money laundering, right? So it's meant to say like, hey, if you're taking in money and it's a front business, it's not a real business, and you're just doing money laundering for some foreign entity or whatever else. This is something that I identified really early on, and I tell you, I partnered with Warren Davidson. If you never heard of him, congressman from Southwest Ohio, terrific guy. He's an Army Ranger. Ranger's like a Green Beret, but not as smart. And so we worked together to try to fight this, and I felt like it was just me and Warren and nobody else was taking this up because it's really wonky stuff, but it's going to hurt small businesses. And so while they're trying to go after money laundering, what they're doing is making a local machine shop fill out all this nonsense paperwork, and if you don't, you go to jail. And they want to know all kinds of information that candidly is none of the government's business about everybody who has a financial interest in the company so they can investigate you and make sure you're not a money launderer. It's a massive bureaucratic nightmare. And you know what's worse? So Warren and I fought this, and unfortunately, it's still passed and it's going into implementation. Here's what's worse. When the feds did this, guess who they exempted? All the big guys, all the fat cats, all the big Fortune 500s that have lobbyists and everything else. It's really just for small business owners. This thing is really ugly, and this really sticks in my craw, because guess who they made responsible for collecting these forms that all these businesses have to fill out? Your state Secretary of State. Are you kidding me? So now I am required by a federal law to implement this thing that I think is terrible. So here's what I told my team to do. Right at the top of the webpage, because my oath requires me to follow the law, we're putting on there in big letters, the Ohio Secretary of State's office did not initiate and does not support this regulation, or something like that, to make sure they know this is, complain to your congressman because we can't do anything about it. We are saddled with this thing that's going to make it difficult. What we are trying to do is work with the chambers of commerce and everything else to make sure that people know that this nightmare is coming their way so that they can at least be prepared for it. So thank you for the question. Yeah.
Hi. I, like many people, was really upset by last week's election results here in Ohio. And now we have people like President Trump saying that Republicans should just give up on trying to ban abortion. So what can we do here in Ohio to keep protecting life? And what will you do when you get to the Senate to protect life on a national level?
Thank you for your question. Let's acknowledge that this is not an easy issue. And let's acknowledge that many of our fellow Republicans voted yes last Tuesday. That's a fact. We need to understand this, and then we need to think about what happened here. I was on if you've ever been down to Cincinnati, there's a great conservative talk show host named Bill Cunningham. I was on his show. Yeah, Willie. He's a great American. He's the guy that started that, right, before Hannity, the great American thing. So Bill Cunningham said, well, it's clear from Tuesday's results that a majority of Ohioans support some abortion rights. I don't disagree that a majority of Ohioans support some abortion rights. But that's not what we put in the Constitution last Tuesday. This is not some abortion rights. This is the most radical pro-abortion amendment in the country that would allow a baby to be killed the day before it's born, that would take away parental involvement, that may open the door to taxpayer-funded abortion through our state Medicaid program. This is not just some modest access to abortion. This is a radical thing. But the problem is we were outspent massively by the other side, a bunch of money from California, New York, and that kind of thing. And so they were able to convince people that this is, well, if you're for abortion rights, vote yes. If you're not for abortion rights, vote no. It wasn't that simple, but that's the way a lot of people came down on this. Now, here's the problem. This is why we don't want to do lawmaking via constitutional amendment. Flashback to August, while we were trying to make it harder to amend the state constitution, because there's all kinds of bad ideas coming our way. The only thing that can change a constitutional amendment is another constitutional amendment. The Constitution is the supreme law of the state, and I know that there's a lot of ideas that they're talking about at the state legislature. Listen, if there are things, reasonable things that we can do to protect life, I'm all for them. I'm not a lawyer. I got a lot of good ones that work for me, and it's going to be really difficult to do much about this because it's now part of our state constitution. Now, you ask about federal. I'm asked this question mostly by reporters that are trying to catch me because they know that Democrats can't run on the economy, they can't run on the border, they can't run on national security, they can't run on anything. The only thing the Democrats can talk about that actually helps them is abortion. So every liberal reporter wants to say, were you for a federal ban? How many weeks? How many exceptions? Blah, blah, blah. And here's what I've said to all of them because I'm not going to get drawn into that. I'm for whatever we can do to protect life. And when I end up in the U.S. Senate, if there are things we can do to get to the majority vote that we need to protect life, I am a pro-life Ohioan, I'm a pro-life American, and that's what I'm going to work to do in the U.S. Senate as well. So, thank you.
My name is John Stover, President of Ohio Value Voters, and thank you very much, Secretary of State LaRose, for being here. You had stated in a piece of literature that we had received at our home about being a hard-charging conservative. And I did have a couple of questions that I think are very important to our organization. And just for full transparency, I do appreciate the fact that you filled out our survey. 2 of the 3 candidates did, and that included your opponent, Bernie Moreno. We have endorsed Bernie. But let me just ask you these questions, if I may. In 2014, you and Sherrod Brown were primary sponsors of the Cleveland Gay Games. That's the first question. I have the information here, but then Equality Ohio then has put out misinformation. You need to correct it then, because your name is listed here. Then the second question I have is that iVoter Guide in 2022, this is the question you did not answer. A very important question as far as I'm concerned, and many of our other people are concerned throughout the state that we communicate with. Here is the question you failed to answer, and I want to know your position. The question was, marriage is a God-ordained, sacred, and legal union of one man and one woman. No government has the authority to alter this definition. You chose not to answer that. I know what the law is in the country. I'm interested in knowing what your position is.
Sure.
Thank you. And once again, thank you for your military service as well. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So let me share this. When this big public event called the Gay Games came to Cleveland, they asked us to send a proclamation because it was the Chamber of Commerce that said, would you send a proclamation because it's going to bring millions of dollars? And we do that for a lot of different big public events. And so, yes, I said, welcome to Cleveland. Hope you spend a lot of money. That was kind of the long and short of that. And so if somebody wants to fault me for, responding to this request from the Chamber of Commerce to send a proclamation welcoming these people to Cleveland to spend money, then so be it. When it comes to marriage, I have my personal beliefs, and my personal beliefs are that marriage is, as you mentioned, ordained as a union between a man and a woman to raise a family, to carry on the species. It's right there in our faith tradition and right there in the Bible. But I also recognize that as a country, that we've now gone to this place where we're recognizing marriage for unions that I don't understand, quite honestly. But it's something that is not likely to change. My faith set is one thing. The laws are another thing. And I'll be honest about this, too. If everything that was immoral was illegal, we wouldn't have enough room in the jails. If we made adultery illegal, you could build jails all day and you'd never be able to to deal with that. So listen, as a matter of settled sort of civil law, I don't think that we're changing that. My personal belief is that marriage is a sacred relationship between a man and a woman. That's that. Yes.
Hello. Thank you again for your service. I have a few questions that a group of us came up together. So, knowing there would be massive confusion from voters after August issue 1, why would you give the November ballot the same number?
Because it's not up to me. I mean, we set the numbering in the ballot board. Understand that everything that the Secretary of State's office does results in a lawsuit. So, like, if we change what kind of paper clips we use, some group like the ACLU will sue us. And so the tradition in Ohio and the law in Ohio is that after each election, the set of numbers start over again. So I couldn't go to 3 or 4 or 5. So we had to start over with 1. And then it has been a longstanding practice, whichever one was filed first gets issue 1, and whichever one was filed second gets issue 2, and if there was one filed third, it would get issue 3. So we followed that. Now, I'll be candid. I consulted with the folks from, the No campaign, and I said, what do you think of this? And they said, we're fine with it. I said, well, good, because it's what we're probably going to have to do anyway. There's an effort right now by a state legislator from Cincinnati to change that so that the numbers just continue on sequentially after that, but it would have to be changed in state law. Yeah.
Thank you. Why did you push for the ballot language change for issue 1? When it first came out, there was no word woman, but then once it was on the ballot, there was woman. So that made people think that it was just purely about abortion.
Yeah, so the work that we did to write that ballot language was informed by interested parties, like any public work should be, right? You talk to the people that are involved. And so as a conservative, as a Republican, as a pro-life Ohioan, I wanted to hear what the leading pro-life activists in the country had to say about this. And so we worked with them on making sure that we wrote ballot language that was truthful, right? And that would also survive a court challenge, because this did end up going in front of the Ohio Supreme Court, and they actually sent us back once for a revision, but we included things like a pregnant woman, because they wanted it to say pregnant patient. Now, I'm no physician, but as far as I can tell, the only people that can be pregnant are women, and that was something that the pro-life community felt very strongly should be included in that. And they liked that as well, because the name of the No campaign was Protect Women Ohio, and the yard sign said Protect Women, and so they wanted that. They thought that was reasonable. They thought that would be helpful to them, and to be honest, they thought it would be honest. The other one that they fought me on is that we replaced the word fetus with unborn child. And this is not, it shouldn't be controversial. The word fetus is a Latin word that means offspring or child. Plus, the Ohio Revised Code, in something like 150 different instances, when speaking of an unborn child, refer to that as an unborn child. Has anyone ever walked up to a pregnant woman and say, when do you expect your fetus? No. When do you expect your child, right? Or, congratulations on your forthcoming birth of your child, that kind of thing. And so we changed it to unborn child. The left lost their minds and fought us on that, but we were able to keep it. So that's why the language was what it was. I consulted with lawyers from groups like Ohio Right to Life and Susan B. Anthony List and Citizens for Christian Virtue and all these other groups, and they brought their expertise to the table, and we came up with the best language we could come up with.
Okay, fine. I had 3 more, but I guess one more.
Make it a tough one.
Make it a tough one? Could I combine 2? Okay. Why did you take funding from Zuckerberg, and why did you allow the cancellation of the 2020 election, knowing full well it was unconstitutional and would give the incumbent candidates an upper hand? And how do you feel about this current election when the flash drive was found a week after elections?
So let's, thank you. Those are 3 questions. I like that. All right. So let's start with Mark Zuckerberg. So when a check showed up in 2020 for a couple $1 million, I went to the state legislature because I read my Constitution and I know that spending authority doesn't come from the Secretary of State's office. It comes from the state legislature. So we asked them, should we spend this money on all the crap we've got to buy for COVID? Because we had to buy hand sanitizer and shields and all this garbage. And the consensus was if we don't spend it on all that boring stuff, it's just going to go to Pennsylvania or Georgia or another state where it could be misused. And so the state legislature authorized us to spend that to save taxpayers' money. Might as well blow Mark's money on hand sanitizer and all that kind of nonsense that we had to buy instead of charging the taxpayers for that. I thought that was responsible. Now here's what happened. We saw in other states, predictably, that they used that money to try to increase Democrat turnout in specific precincts. Shocking. So if we hadn't spent it here, then they would have had more money to spend for that nefarious purpose in places like Pennsylvania. So here's what we did about it. I am a member of the Republican Secretaries of State Committee. In fact, I'm in line to be chair of that group next year because my colleagues around the country recognize that Ohio does a good job of running elections. And so we've gone state to state and outlawed that in almost half of the states. I think we're at 24 states. So we're working to outlaw that. And if you noticed, in 2022, they took the signal and they didn't do that again. And so when somebody abuses something and uses it for nefarious purposes, you work to get it outlawed. You mentioned the 2020 election. It's a bit trip down memory lane here, but I want people to understand that I was never in support of canceling Election Day. In fact, when I got that call that no Secretary of State should ever get from the governor on Monday morning, I fought him on it. I said, Governor, the horse is out of the barn, the toothpaste is out of the tube, the you-know-what's out of the horse. We're having the election. Because the night before, I had talked with the Ohio Department of Health and the Centers for Disease Control, Trump's own Centers for Disease Control, and they said, you're clear to do it, just follow all these things, and that way people can be safe. And so we were running the election. I got a call less than 24 hours beforehand saying, I'm going to use my health authority to keep this election from happening. I said, Governor, we can't do that. We got to run the election. And he said, listen, Frank, I'm doing it. And so what I was faced with is, and I told him, I said, you know, he said he was going to make an announcement that there can't be gatherings of more than 10 people. And by the way, the Trump administration that same day said that there shouldn't be more than gatherings of 10 people. And so he said, if you still hold an election, you're going to be engaging in the largest act of voter suppression that ever existed, because you'll be holding an election when the health authorities are telling people they can't go vote. And so he did what he was going to do, and I didn't have any choice in that. But I'll tell you what we did to make it better, because again, no Secretary of State should ever get the call that I got. And so 3 months later, I sat on my back porch with the Senate President, a guy you guys probably know, Larry Obhoff from Medina, and President Obhoff and I drafted an amendment that was put into the state budget to make it abundantly clear, I think it was already clear, but to make it abundantly clear that the governor does not have that authority. In fact, it becomes a criminal violation if a future governor attempts to do that. And so again, that's what leaders do when they're addressed with a crappy situation, is they find a way to make sure that that never happens again. This situation in Cuyahoga County, completely unacceptable. And in fact, I was on a conference call with my team about this today. This is what happens, though, when you've got 88 boards of elections and 4,000 polling locations and whatever else. They didn't follow their procedures. They didn't follow the procedures that we've laid out. And when people don't follow the procedures, then human mistakes get made. Now, the good news is that it was caught and it's being, addressed. People will face the consequences for being sloppy. And the reason why the election night result is only the unofficial result is for reasons like this. We still haven't done the post-election audit. We're about to start the post-election audit process. The official certified result of the election comes about 3 weeks afterwards. And again, this is why those processes exist, to make sure that if a sloppy error like that is made, it can be caught before the official certified results of the election instead of just the election night unofficial results. Next question.
Hey, I'm Scott.
Scott.
Thanks for coming tonight.
Yes, sir.
And thanks for your service.
Amen.
I asked Marino and Dolan these same questions.
Okay.
Who do you plan on supporting in the presidential primary in 2024?
Donald Trump. I endorsed him 6 months ago. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah.
I'm also a Trump supporter.
My wife is one of his convention delegates, and I worked on his inaugural in 2017. In fact, it was my honor. I got to buckle his grandchildren into their car seats for the motorcade. So I've been Team Trump from the beginning, and I'm proud of that. Yeah.
Good deal. Thanks. And thanks for having the fortitude of saying that.
Absolutely.
And do you believe that the 2020 election was conducted fairly and without fraud? That's all I have.
Yeah, so it was conducted fairly in Ohio. In other states, they made big mistakes, and they did things that shouldn't happen, right? One of the biggest ones is states like Georgia, where they settled the lawsuits instead of fighting them. I was sued 5 times in the month of October in 2020. Dave Yost and I fought and won all of those lawsuits. But in other states, they settle the lawsuits, right? This is one of the things, this flies below the radar, and people have a lot of other concerns about election integrity, but they don't think about these last-minute lawsuits from the ACLU and this guy named Mark Elias, who Google him, he's a complete scumbag, he sues me all the time. That's where the real shenanigans happens. It's not in secret. It's in full public view. When they file a lawsuit, they'll send a lawyer and they'll say, you know, that lawsuit's a lot, and I know that you're busy trying to get ready to run this election. If you just give us 30% of what we're asking for, we'll withdraw the lawsuit. The problem is, that's like paying the hostage taker's ransom, right? You don't need to be a law enforcement expert to understand when you pay hostage takers, they only take more hostages. And so when you give the ACLU 30% of what they're asking for this year, what do you think they're going to do next year? They're going to sue you again to try to get the next 30 and the next 30, and pretty soon, when the camel's nose was under the tent, the whole thing's under there, right? And they're changing the rules at the last minute. The other thing, as we mentioned, is that in some states, they used money from billionaires like Mark Zuckerberg to try to drive turnout in Democratic precincts, and that is completely unacceptable. We had secretaries of state that were ignoring their own laws and doing things like, hey, we're going to stop verifying signatures, or we're going to arbitrarily extend the number of days that we'll accept absentee ballots, even though their laws didn't allow it. Here's a one that drives me crazy. There were some states sending absentee ballots to people that never asked for them. They just sent absentee ballots out to everybody in the state, even though their law didn't allow it, and it was crisis opportunism. They said, well, but there's a pandemic, so we got to do it, and they got away with it. And that's the problem that happened in 2020. We need to call that stuff out so it doesn't happen again, because in 2020, there was a pandemic. I worry in 2024, there's going to be a Dem panic. Get it? Pandemic turning into Dem panic. And they're going to try to do crazy stuff like that when it looks like Trump's coming back. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you very much. We have one last question,
Okay.
and then you're off the hook.
This is a year-long job interview. I'm here to talk to my prospective employer, so bring it on.
Hello, Mr. Frank LaRose. As a fiscal conservative, I'm very concerned with the national debt being over $30 trillion. Do you support the war in Ukraine? And if you do, how do you suppose we pay for it and not go into further debt and not go into further deficit?
2 great questions, and you're not hearing enough people talking about a $33 trillion national debt. I was describing this to my daughters the other day. We throw numbers like trillion around and don't think about what it means. A trillion is 1,000 billion dollars. 1 trillion is 1,000 billion. The national debt is 33 trillion, on its way to 34 in short order. And Biden is making it worse by the day. Think about this. Within the next 2 years, the defense budget is going to be less than the interest payments. So when you borrow money, you got to pay interest on it. The money that we pay to, in some cases, hostile foreign nations that we borrow that money from, the interest payments alone are going to be more than the entire defense budget within a couple of years. It's generational theft. The people in charge right now are living high, and they're passing it off to us and our children and grandchildren. So you asked about Ukraine. That statement I made earlier about American strength was not a bluff. I don't think we need to throw more money at it. I think we need to be more serious about making sure that the situation is such that Ukraine can end the war without giving their country to Vladimir Putin. That doesn't benefit anybody. Putin is a thug. He's a scumbag. He's one of the worst humans on the planet. And capitulating to him is not in our best interest. So we don't want to wave the white flag. We don't want Ukraine to wave the white flag. What we need to do is create a strategic situation where this can end on the terms that are favorable to Ukraine. Part of that means, as I said, making the sanctions work. Here's a wild idea. The Green Berets, my guys, they exist primarily for one reason. Training foreign militaries is what we do. Training foreign militaries. Biden, by the way, said he's going to cut the spending for the special operations community, which is absolute nonsense. We train foreign armies. Why not put a battalion of Green Berets in Poland, and a battalion of Green Berets in Hungary, and a battalion of Green Berets in Romania, and bring these Ukrainians out to get some training and send them back in ready to go fight the bad guys and kill them? That doesn't cost anything. The Green Berets are already getting their salary. Might as well be in the safety of Poland, Romania, and Ukraine, training Poland, Romania, and Hungary, training Ukrainians so they can go kill their bad guys, because it's not our job to do. That's the kind of solution that I would like to see. President Trump said he's going to end it quickly. I fear that it won't happen until he's in the White House, but he will end it quickly, but not by surrendering. And that's the key. We can't surrender, but we also don't want to keep throwing money at a problem that can't necessarily be solved just with money. All right?
Frank, thank you so much. One last question, and for those of you who haven't been to a Decision 2024 series, we did break our normal protocol, and Strongsville GOP actually has one question that we have offered to every candidate that's come on stage, not just for Senate, but all of the other races, because it's so important. And let me just give you I'm going to break our own rule again. I'm going to tell you a statement before I do a question, so Rob, don't cut me off.
President's prerogative.
That's right. That's right. Strongsville's got an interesting story when it comes around the state. We are very unique in the sense that we had to go through after 2021, after 2020 and then right into 21, our congressman, who we all thought we liked, didn't recognize that he was a sheep, in wolf's clothing, right? A wolf in sheep's clothing, that is. He decided to.
No, he was a sheep in wolf's clothing.
Well,
whatever
he was bad. He decided that he's going to go vote to impeach our president with no due process, right? No facts. Sided with the Democrats, sat up there with Liz Cheney every day, and put on a show with the Democrats. Fast forward to earlier this year, we had a situation where we have a supermajority down in the House, right? And that's a great thing. First time since I've been involved in politics where we can actually get some conservative things done, a backpack bill, some significant changes. That issue one we had in August should have been on the ballot in May. We all know that.
What we proposed, yeah.
That's exactly it. It should have all happened. But once again, we had these supposed Republicans, Bob France likes to call them trans Dems, right? These supposed Republicans decide to go, like Tom Patton, our state representative. Once again, we get screwed here in Strongsville with Republicans that are siding with the Dems, and they go and he does a deal with the Democrats and picks their choice for speaker, not our choice. Now we have Republicans in Strongsville, elected officials, that are fighting against our endorsed Republican candidates, endorsing the Democrats, and now want to run for higher office. We are in a culture of Republicans turning on their own, and I'm not talking about fighting about taxes or fighting about abortion. We're literally talking about Republicans all over this area deciding to choose the Democrats over the voters. The voters send them there, they choose the Democrats. So my question for you is this. It's very simple. We've asked this question to every candidate, and I'm interested with commentary on the backside of it from you. First off, we just had a scenario in January where 22 Republicans didn't like that we were going conservative in the state, so they decided that they're going to side up with the Democrats and pick their choice for speaker instead of our choice for speaker. What scenario, if we elect you into the Senate, would you ever choose to side with Chuck Schumer and choose a Democrat or their choice for the president of Senate? What scenario would happen for that? And in addition to that, what will you say when you're on the campaign trail about these Republicans siding with the Democrats like the Blue 22 did, like guys like Tom Patton did?
To the question of what scenario, none ever. I'm standing at the Strongsville GOP Club. I'm a member of the GOP. We run as Republicans so that we can go to either Columbus or Washington and then do Republican things. That's why people work so hard. So many of you have knocked on thousands of doors and walked in parades and made phone calls. We don't work our butts off to elect Republicans so that they can cut a deal with Democrats to put their chosen person in office. Under no circumstances would I condone something like that. And listen, there's this question that Republicans get all the time. How would you work with the Democrats? The Democrats never get that question. How would you work with the Republicans, right? Here's how I'd work with them. Try to convince them to come over to our side. If they're interested in securing the border and cutting taxes, if they're interested in getting rid of regulations and restoring American strength in the world, then okay, vote for our bill. If not, we're going to build a majority and run over you. It's how this works. It's not personal. And so, no, I would not support anything that Chuck Schumer is interested in. I wouldn't walk across the street to, you know what, if he was on fire. How's that?
That's good. That's great. But my follow-up question on that was,
oh yeah,
the members of the Blue 22 that are many of them running for election. You know, Tom Patton's now running because he thinks the Senate is the next best place to corrupt. What do you have to say about those that decided to turn their back on our party, which, by the way, the Ohio Republican Party censured them immediately. Strongsville GOP censured and prevented Tom Patton from receiving any endorsements from us for 4 years. And then the Cuyahoga County Republican Party decided to remove him from the Republican Party, right? And now many of our candidates are soliciting and promoting his endorsement for their run for office. What do you have to say? If they went to endorse you for office, would you accept that endorsement?
I think that it's going to be up to the voters to hold them accountable. I think the party has done what it needs to do. I think the clubs have done what they need to do, and they've said, in our opinion, this person is not in good standing with our party, right? And so you guys have done that through the censure process. The state party and the county party have done that, and now it's going to be up to the voters. That's as simple as I can say it. I, for one, wouldn't have made the decision that they made. I think that, you know, in some ways it's too bad because they have, many of these guys have a track record of getting some good conservative things done, but that vote is concerning, and voters will hold them accountable for that. That's why this work is so public. That's why the votes that you cast on the Senate floor, on the House floor, are not done in secret. There's no secret ballot. It's because you got to be fully accountable for it and stand up and say, hey, here's why I did it. If you think you can defend it and get 51% of the vote, then God bless you. I think that the members of the party are going to be pretty concerned about that. All right? Yep.
Hi, my only question is, as you've seen with all the issues and stuff like that happening, and Ohioans not really going for what we believe in, I was wondering, when it comes to the schools and the children, if we were to elect you in Senate, what would you do to protect the children?
So there are things that we can do at the federal level, but primarily education is a local responsibility. That's why it's so important that we elect good school board members, but it's important also that we do things that we can do at the federal level. One of them is getting rid of the U.S. Department of Education. Let me be clear about this. The U.S. Department of Education is a multi-billion-dollar bureaucracy that mostly exists to employ adults and to give grants with strings attached. They say, if you implement this new DEI, social emotional learning, gobbledygook BS, then you're going to get this federal money. And so they give out money as a way of driving education policy. The U.S. Department of Education need not exist. The other thing that we should do is we should do school choice nationwide. Listen, competition, we know this as conservatives. Competition makes us stronger. It works that way on the athletic field. It works that way in free markets. It works that way in education. And these government-run schools are not interested in competing. And so we need to make sure the money follows the child, like the backpack bill. We've made some good progress in Ohio. Honestly, there's further we can go with that, but we need to bring school choice nationwide. I think that school choice is the civil rights issue of our generation. I really do. There's also a thing called the Parents' Bill of Rights that is, it's more than symbolic. It has some teeth to it, but there's a bill that passed in Congress that is unfortunately languishing in the Senate because the liberals in charge there, that reinforces Parents' Bill of Rights and parents' rights. And I think that one of the things that we need to do, and this is not something that we mandate from the federal government because the federal government shouldn't be setting curriculum, but I think at a local level, we need to see a revival of civics education. Civics education. Public education really exists for two reasons. One is to prepare people for careers, meaningful careers, so they can earn a living and provide for themselves and not be on the government dole their whole lives. But the other reason is so that they can be active citizens. In a republic, you need to have active citizens that know how a bill becomes a law, that know what the hell the difference is between state and federal government and that kind of thing, and understand three branches of government, separation of powers, the stuff that all of us got in 7th grade civics class. Too many people don't have that, including people with high school and college educations that have no idea how any of that stuff works. So I'm going to wrap up. As I said, this is a job interview. I believe sincerely that I'm the one who has the wherewithal to defeat Sherrod Brown. I'm asking you to help me do that and to put a battle-tested conservative in the United States Senate. My website is franklarose.com. I'm asking for your prayers. That's the most important thing I could get from you. And I'm asking for your vote. And with your help, we'll defeat Sherrod Brown. Thank you so much. Strongsville GOP. God bless each and every one of you. Hey, thank you. Yep.
All right. Everyone, once again, our Secretary of State, Frank LaRose. All right, so there are a couple folks that did want to say a couple words that walked in after we started. Jeremiah Sawyer is in the room. If you could come on up first, and then we'll have Chuck second. While Jeremiah is coming up, I want to do a good job introducing him to the group here. If you haven't done so already, I want to make sure that you recognize that we have a great Christmas party for Strongsville GOP. If you haven't seen it yet, we're going to watch your email tomorrow. We're going to put the official announcement out tomorrow that our guest for our Christmas party, which will be Thursday, December 7th, is going to be Congressman Matt Gaetz. And I'll tell you, it will be a very interesting conversation to hear his side of the story of what happened in Congress. And I trust me, his side is a lot more true than what the media is telling us. So very interested to hear that. I do want to invite up to the stage a face that many of you have seen around our organization many a times. He has taken upon himself to organize the conservatives in the Ohio School Board Association, his own organization that he started to organize conservatives and constitutional believing school board members around the state, and has done a phenomenal job doing that right out of North Royalton as a school board member in North Royalton. But Jeremiah Sawyer has a big announcement for us. I'm going to take out the thunder for him because we are so darn excited, because you all know I'm no fan of Tom Patton anymore. We used to be a big fan of his. I've endorsed him personally, worked for him. I've walked door to door for him for 20 years, but he turned his back on us. And I am so proud to be able to say we have a true conservative running in the 24th Senate District to beat Tom Patton this March, and that is North Royalton's own Jeremiah Sawyer.
Thanks, Shannon. Thanks, everybody. If you didn't watch or listen to Bob France today, I announced officially that I'm running for the 24th District for the Ohio Senate seat. Can I get it to you? Thank you. In 2020, my eyes were opened up with school boards and how terrible leaders were not leading our people and protecting our children. So I decided to run for school board in North Royalton, and I beat an incumbent, a well-established incumbent, in 2021. I organized OSBCC to get more conservatives in the fight for our children and to take back our schools. I know last week was disappointing because of issue 1 and 2, but through OSBCC, we gained 30 seats in school boards across Ohio, and we flipped 6 boards from liberal to conservative last week. I can't take the credit for it. I just helped to organize and lead the group. It's the hard work of all the candidates. It's a lot of work. It's tough. People get real personal. But it's really good to know that a lot of the citizens came out and voted and supported their local school board members. I grew up here in Strongsville, if you don't know that. I went to the old Center Junior High, the old one, the one that's not there anymore. I used to own a business here in Strongsville. I used to own the Cold Stone Creamery that was down the street. I owned that for about 5 years. Thank you. I love ice cream and I love Cold Stone, but it's just too seasonal for Cleveland, Ohio. The winters were brutal to make money. But I love Northeast Ohio. I was born and raised here. I raised my family in North Royalton. I went to Ohio State. My kids went to Ohio State. My wife went to Ohio State. My wife has a small business in Broadview Heights, a family medicine business. So I've been raised and been a part of this community from the time I was a kid till now, raising my family and working and starting businesses and getting jobs for citizens and fighting for citizens. I'm a fighter. I wrestled at St. Ed's quite a few years ago and quite a few less pounds ago. But I know what it's like to be a fighter and be in a tough situation and have to face adversity. That's why I ran for school board. And that's why I'm running against Tom Patton here coming up in March in the primary for the 24th district to include Strongsville and all you in here. I know it's going to be a fight. He's got a name. But I've got a purpose. I learned through running for school board how important it is and how important it is for citizens to stand up and fight for citizens, for less government, less taxes, empower the people that are in this room, empower the taxpayers, shrink the government. Is anybody talking about cutting costs in Ohio? Have you ever heard anybody talking about that? I don't hear anybody talking about cutting costs in Ohio. I'd like to cut costs, get taxpayer dollars back to the citizens who vote. I'd like to empower the schools more, cut the bureaucracy. Not only is the federal government hurting education, is Frank still over there? All right. Even Ohio is hurting education. We pass laws that make it so much more complicated to educate our kids and not empower the local schools to teach the kids what the citizens of the cities want to teach the kids. A whole bureaucracy has been created within our own, a mini government in Ohio is the educational system in Ohio. We spend a lot of money, create a lot of bureaucracy, and create tons of overhead and added services that schools don't need. They've lost all focus of education of our kids. ACT scores are down, the public school rankings are down. We've spent all this money and all we've done is gone. If you're in business and you saw the chart for Ohio education, it's failing. There's too much bureaucracy and it has to get cut, and we have to empower the people. Tom Patton has not done anything for our schools. I'm an outsider. Tom's an insider. He's flipped back and forth from House to Senate, House to Senate. I'm doing this now. I've been working in business for the last 20 plus years, raising my family. I'm an outsider. He's an insider. I want small government, less government. He just keeps growing the government. And he's rated the lowest conservative legislator in Ohio, down in Columbus. Well, the third lowest. So I'm conservative to the bone. That's why I'm here, and I'm a fighter, and I'll fight for you, and thanks for your time.
Really looking forward to hearing more from Jeremiah. I will say that one other person asked to speak, and that is that Chuck Barchi, if you come up, he's actually representing Mike Davila, who is running for state representative, would be running to represent us here in Strongsville. Chuck Barchi.
Hello. I know I'm in maybe enemy territory here because Gordon Short's going to be running against Mike Davila in 17th House District, and you know, it's kind of sad when you have two great candidates running. But I just want to talk a second for Mike Davila. I was at his kickoff event at Mike's place in Berea yesterday and got to hear from our treasurer. And Mike's been in the House already for 6 years. He served the country in the Navy for 21 years. He was appointed by Trump at a senior level. And he's just done a wonderful job. And he's the type of guy that just going to work hard and really represent us and a real professional. He's a chief executive officer of a U.S. Cleveland Legacy Foundation, which is going to try to name a ship for Cleveland. He was a senior advisor at Voinovich. He's run small businesses. He's very well educated with 2 masters and a PhD. He's just a man that I think you need to take a look at. So I know maybe your hometown favorite is going to be tough, but I need to look at Mike. So I'm just asking for your support for Mike Davila.
Thank you, Chuck. Yeah, and Mike Davila just had his announcement on yesterday, and State Treasurer Robert Sprague was actually there for it. Heard it went very well. Believe that Davila is also endorsed by the incoming, hopefully incoming speaker to take out the Dems' choice for speaker is Matt Huffman. So I think that Davila is endorsed by him as well. Thank you, Chuck, for the update on that. Mark asked for 30 seconds to talk about the small business forum. I'm interested because clearly I'd never heard about this crazy policy again. So Mark, I'd appreciate if you could shed some light on it.
Well, actually, I just heard about it today in continuing education for tax return preparation for next year. The dates that these are going to have to be filed is between, if you have an existing business right now, between January 1st of 2024 and January 1st of 2025. When you take your information in to get your taxes done next year, if you have a small business, talk to your accountant about it because they're going to be filing the forms. So just to give you a heads up.
Great, thanks. I'm sure you'll be around to answer questions. Well, with that, all I have left for everyone is to just get your calendars out again. Let me just give you these dates again. We've got 3 more events coming up that are scheduled. Notwithstanding, if somebody could scream out the dates of our Breakfast Club. Anyone have them? I'll give somebody a chance to look those up. The next 3 events, 2 weeks from tonight, we have a town hall meeting with Lieutenant Governor John Husted, which, as worst kept secret, he's also one of the gentlemen looking to run for governor in 26. We've had Dave Yost came in August, Robert Sprague in September, and now John Husted in 2 weeks from now. They'll be right here on Wednesday, the 29th at 7 o'clock. As I mentioned before, that is a free event. Any Republicans are welcome. We have on Thursday, December 7th, held at the Aviator Club, which is the old 100th Bomber Squadron, where I have Congressman Matt Gaetz. Great event. It's a dinner, but there's also an opportunity for a photo op upgrade and a VIP party as well, if you're interested in that. And then to announce officially, we've been talking about state representative and state senate. It's not something we've done on the stage yet, and it's because we had to get through all of the Senate races, and all these guys just finally announced their candidacy within the last week or 2. So on Wednesday, January 17th, here at Harvest Saloon, we are going to have a state representative forum for the 17th House District. As of right now, those 2 individuals are Mike Davila and Gordon Short that have agreed to attend and have a format. It's not going to be the same format. It's going to be a little bit shorter because we have to have both of them on the same night, but stay tuned on that. Wednesday, January 17th. Should be a great event. And then, of course, if you haven't been paying attention, we're less than 90 days out from the election. Presidential election, U.S. Senate race, state rep, state senate, all of that will happen within 90 days. So we're right there. It's great that everyone's engaged. Love to have your support. Make certain that you're paying attention to these candidates and sharing it with your friends and family. Does anyone have the Breakfast Club dates by chance yet? It's a Saturday. Thanks, Rob. All right, check the email. If you aren't familiar with it, a whole bunch of us get together about 2 Saturdays a month over at Mulligan's at Prospect and 82 for what's called our Breakfast Club. And it's no speakers, it's just everyone, a bunch of conservatives get together, have breakfast on a Saturday morning to talk, and Ed tells everyone about why it's great to vote Republican, and other than that, it's a great time, and it's a good time, good chance for some fellowship with other conservatives. So we'll make sure we get that out by email. If there's nothing else, seeing none, then we're adjourned for the night. Thank you, everyone.